I used to believe that if you stayed calm, did good work, and didn't play politics, you'd be safe. Not promoted fast, safe. Not everyone loves you, safe. Just safe enough to build a life. For 3 years, I was the person who fixed things without making noise. If a client escalated at 9:47 p.m., I answered. If a system went down on a Sunday, I logged in. If a manager needed a quick summary for a director meeting, I wrote it. Clean, sharp, and bulletproof. And the funny thing is, I didn't even resent it, because I liked being the guy who could handle pressure. Yeah, my role sat in that awkward space between operations and compliance, close enough to risk to understand it, but far enough from leadership to never get credit for preventing it. I worked at a mid-sized fintech vendor, about 600 employees. Not a startup, not a corporate giant, one of those places that pretends to be family until money gets tight. The first sign something changed was small. My manager, Derek, stopped booking our weekly 1.1s, not canceling them, not rescheduling, just silently letting them die. Then my access requests started getting delayed. Things I used to get approved in an hour suddenly took 3 days, like someone wanted me waiting. I told myself it was normal. New quarter, new priorities, people busy. That's what you tell yourself when you still want to believe the place you give your time to is fair. But then came the Wednesday meeting invite. No subject line, no agenda, just HR sync, $2 p.m. And the attendee list made my stomach sink. Me, Derek, and Lena from HR. Lena wasn't the helpful HR type. She was the kind who smiled with her mouth and kept her eyes flat, like she'd already decided what you deserved. I walked into the small conference room at 1:58, because being late gives people a reason to talk. Derek was already there, sitting too straight, not looking at his laptop, not even pretending to work. Lena was setting down a folder, a real folder, paper. That alone made my palms damp. Because in 2025, nobody brings paper unless they want to make something feel final. Lena started with the classic line, "Thanks for joining. We just want to have a quick conversation." Her tone was light, almost friendly, but her folder was centered in front of her like a weapon. I sat down, kept my face neutral, and said, "Sure. What's this about?" Derek cleared his throat like he was about to read someone else's obituary. Lena opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "Before we begin," she said, "we'll need you to review and acknowledge this." I didn't touch it. I just looked at the top line. Performance Improvement Plan. My heart didn't race. It didn't explode. It just dropped. Because I hadn't had a single warning, no coaching plan, no concerns, no write-up. And I knew enough about corporate games to understand what this was. Not a plan to improve me. A plan to remove me. I forced my voice to stay steady. "I'm confused," I said. "What performance issue are we talking about?" Lena didn't answer directly. She did that HR thing where she speaks around the truth. "We've observed patterns," she said. "Communication, responsiveness, alignment with team direction." Derek finally looked at me, and the look on his face wasn't anger. It was worse. It was avoidance. Like he didn't want to see the moment I realized he'd been part of it. I reached for the document, not to sign it, just to read it. And that's when I saw the date in the header. It was dated 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks. Meaning, this wasn't created today. This wasn't a reaction to something I did yesterday. This was prepared in advance. I looked up slowly. "Why is this dated from 2 weeks ago?" I asked. Lena didn't blink. "This is the date the concerns were formally documented." Derek swallowed, and in that swallow I saw it clearly. This had been decided. He'd known. The meeting wasn't to discuss performance. It was to make my signature the final stamp. I leaned back, kept my hands off the paper, and asked the only question that mattered. "Can I take this home and review it?" Lena's smile tightened. "We prefer acknowledgement during the meeting." "Of course. Because once you sign, it becomes mutual. It becomes, we warned him. He agreed. He understood." I nodded slowly like I was considering it. Then I asked, "Okay, before I sign anything, can you tell me what specific incident triggered this?" Lena flipped a page in the folder like she was performing a ritual. "There have been multiple," she said. "The most recent one involved refusing a directive from your manager." I stared at Derek. "What directive?" I asked him directly. Derek cleared his throat again. "You pushed back on the timeline change for the Kestrel account," he said. "You created friction." And suddenly I understood what this was really about. Because the Kestrel account wasn't just any client. Kestrel was our largest contract, the one leadership loved to brag about. And 2 weeks ago, Derek tried to force a timeline change that would have put us in violation of the compliance rules we'd signed. Not maybe in violation, guaranteed. I'd said no. Not emotionally. Not loudly. I'd said, "If we do it that way, we'll breach the audit requirements. Put it in writing and I'll follow it." That was it. That was my crime. I looked back at Lena. "So the performance issue is that I asked for documentation before violating policy?" Her smile stayed on, but her eyes hardened. "Your tone was resistant," she said. That's when my jaw tightened. Not because I was shocked, because I realized what they were doing. They weren't firing me for incompetence. They were punishing me for being a risk to their shortcuts. And then Lena added the line that changed everything. "This is being documented as insubordination." That word. It wasn't casual. It wasn't a description. It was a label they could use later. If I ever questioned my termination, if I ever applied somewhere else, if I ever tried to fight it. Insubordination makes you look like a problem, a bad employee, a liability. And I saw Derek's shoulders relax slightly, like he was relieved the ugly word came from HR and not him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just asked one more question, and I watched both of them stiffen at the same time. "Can I have a copy of this right now?" I said. "And can you confirm in writing that this is being categorized as insubordination?" Lena paused, and in that pause I felt the air change. Because she knew what I knew. The second they put something in writing, it can be used. I looked down at the document again, and my eyes landed on one line near the bottom, a line most people would ignore because they're busy panicking. But I wasn't panicking. I was reading. Employment Agreement Reference, Section 9.4. I recognized that reference instantly, because I had negotiated my contract when I joined. Not because I was special, because they'd recruited me hard from a competitor after a nasty compliance incident. They needed someone who understood audits and risk. And in exchange for leaving a stable job, I made sure my exit terms were clear. Section 9.4 wasn't about performance. It wasn't about bonuses. It was about what happens if the company ends the relationship in a way that damages reputation. And it had a word in it that made HR departments sweat. Misclassification. I kept my face blank, but inside, something clicked into place like a lock turning. They thought this meeting was the beginning of the end. They didn't know they'd just put their hand on the wrong wire. I pushed the document back toward Lena without signing. "I'm not acknowledging this today," I said calmly. "I'll need legal review." Derek's eyes widened slightly. Lena's smile finally disappeared, and she said very carefully, "Refusing to sign will be noted." I nodded. "Then note it," I said, "and please include my request for a copy." Lena leaned back like she was recalculating. Derek looked like he wanted to vanish into the carpet, and I realized something that hit me harder than the PIP itself. This wasn't just a plan to manage me out. This was a plan to make me look guilty while they covered their own mistakes. But that decision, the decision to call it insubordination, I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. By the time I got back to my desk, I could feel the office moving around me like nothing happened. People laughing in Slack, someone heating up lunch, a calendar invite for a holiday cheers virtual thing popping up like we were all one big family. And I'm sitting there with my hands on the keyboard, trying to keep my breathing normal, because in the last 20 minutes, HR had basically told me, sign this, or we'll write the story without you. I opened my email and searched the meeting invite. No agenda, no notes, no paper trail. That was the first thing I did, because if you worked in corporate long enough, you learn the rule. If they're trying to end you, they'll try to erase the timeline first. I messaged Lena. Short, polite, clean. Hi, Lena. Per our meeting, please send me a copy of the PIP document for review. Also confirming you stated it's being documented as insubordination. I hit send, then immediately forwarded the email to my personal account. Not because I was plotting revenge, because I'd learned the hard way that HR conversations have a way of disappearing the moment they become inconvenient. Then I opened my contract, the one I signed when I joined, the one Derek probably never read. Most people don't negotiate employment contracts at mid-sized companies. They just sign the offer letter and hope for the best. But I didn't come in the usual way. I'd been recruited after a competitor got hit with audit findings, and my name had been on the team that cleaned it up. When this company approached me, they promised stability and long-term growth. I didn't trust promises, I trusted clauses. So I'd asked for a severance package and a non-disparagement section that was mutual. Meaning if they wanted me quiet, they'd have to be careful about how they describe my exit. That's where Section 9.4 lived. I scrolled until I found it. In the event of termination for cause, the company must provide documented evidence of willful misconduct or material breach. Any misclassification of cause that results in reputational harm triggers the separation remedy in Exhibit B. Exhibit B. I clicked it, and there it was, spelled out in corporate legal language so dry it could kill a plant. 3 months, severance minimum, accelerated vesting on remaining bonus company, covers COBRA equivalent, and a penalty payment if they publicly or formally label the separation as for cause without proof. It wasn't a lottery ticket, it was protection, and the key phrase was documented evidence of willful misconduct. Not he pushed back, not he asked for it in writing, not his tone wasn't aligned. Actual misconduct. If they wanted to call me insubordinate, they'd need something real. And the more I sat there reading, the more something else became obvious. They hadn't built a case. They were trying to create one. That's why the PIP was predated. That's why they wanted my signature in the room. That's why Lena said, we prefer acknowledgement during the meeting. Because the moment I refused, the next step was predictable. They'd start baiting me. They'd give me impossible deadlines, cut my access, force a mistake, then file it as proof. So I decided to do something boring but effective. I started documenting everything. I created a folder on my personal drive called Kestrel Timeline, and then I exported every email thread about the timeline change Derek referenced. Not confidential client data, just internal communications showing my exact language, what I said, what I warned, what I refused to do. And the most important part, I found Derek's message from 2 weeks ago. It was in Slack. He wrote, "Need you to sign off on moving the validation step to post-launch. We can't miss this date." And I replied, "I can't sign off unless compliance approves. This violates the audit requirement in the MSA. Put directive in writing if you want me to proceed." He never replied. He just went quiet. And now, suddenly, that same week was the formal documentation date for my so-called performance issues. I stared at the screen and felt something hot behind my eyes. Not fear, disgust. Because I realized I hadn't been part of the team. I'd been their airbag. The thing that absorbs impact when leadership makes dumb decisions. And the moment the airbag tries to talk, they cut it out and call it defective. At 4:17 p.m., Lena responded to my email. It was one sentence. "We will provide documentation through appropriate channels." Appropriate channels. Corporate code for, "We'll give you what we want, when we want, in a form that protects us." Then Derek slacked me. Not a call, not face-to-face. A Slack message. Like we were discussing lunch plans. Hey, just want to keep things calm. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. I read it 3 times, because what he meant was accept the label quietly. And something snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just a clean internal switch. That night, I didn't rant to friends. I didn't post online. I didn't even tell my family the full details. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and wrote a timeline, minute by minute. When the 1-1 stopped, when my access requests got delayed, when the HR invite came, what Lena said, word for word, what Derek accused me of, the date on the PIP, my request for a copy, their refusal to send it directly. And then I did one more thing. I requested, through our internal ticketing system, a copy of my entire employee file. Company policy allowed it. Almost nobody uses that policy because almost nobody thinks HR will ever come for them. But I did. I made the request formal and trackable because I wanted to see what they were already writing about me behind the scenes. An hour later, my manager's calendar updated. A new recurring invite appeared on my calendar starting the next morning. Daily, 9 a.m. The title was simple, Performance Check-In. And my stomach didn't drop this time. This time, I felt something else, a cold kind of clarity. Because I understood what the next 2 weeks were going to be. They were going to push until I broke, or until I quit. But that was just the beginning. The next morning, before the first check-in even started, I opened my inbox and saw an email from IT. Access update completed per management request. No details, just that line. And when I tried to log into the compliance dashboard, the one system I needed for my job, my screen flashed a message I'd never seen before, access revoked. And that's when I realized they weren't testing my performance. They were trying to set up my failure. The first performance check-in started exactly at 9 a.m. Derek didn't waste time with pleasantries. He shared his screen and pulled up a spreadsheet titled Expectations Immediate Improvement. It had daily deliverables, timestamps, and boxes labeled Met Not Met. It looked less like coaching and more like a scoreboard. Let's keep this simple, he said. You need to show responsiveness and alignment. No friction. I kept my voice even. I can't access the compliance dashboard, I said. IT says access was revoked per management request. I need it to do my job. Derek didn't look surprised. That's what chilled me. Then work around it, he said. You're smart. Figure it out. That phrase, figure it out, is corporate shorthand for, I'm setting you up to fail, and I want you to own the failure. I said, I can't work around audit validation. I need access. Can you confirm who requested the revocation so I can route it properly? Derek's jaw tightened for half a second. IT handles access, he said. Don't make this about other people. There it was again. Don't make this bigger. Don't create a trail. Don't name the hand that pushed you. I nodded like I accepted it. But I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I did what I always did when something smelled wrong. I documented, and I forced clarity. Right after the call, I sent an email to Derek and Lena. Subject: access required to perform assigned duties. 3 short paragraphs. I noted I no longer had access to the compliance dashboard. I listed the specific deliverables Derek assigned that required that access. I asked plainly for written confirmation of how they wanted me to proceed without it. No accusations. No emotion. Just reality. Then I opened a ticket with IT myself. I attached screenshots of the access revoked message and asked for the change log. When access changed and which request initiated it. Most employees don't do that because they assume IT is a black box. But IT systems log everything, especially in companies that pretend to take compliance seriously. An hour later, IT replied, we can restore access, but the revocation was initiated via an approved request from your cost center manager. Please confirm with management. Cost center manager, Derek. And it hit me in a way that made my hands go cold. He didn't accidentally forget my access. He didn't assume I didn't need it. He deliberately removed the tool I needed so the next check-in could say, he missed deliverables. He's non-compliant. He's the risk. That afternoon's check-in was worse. Derek asked me to produce a compliance sign-off summary for Kestrel by end of day. I said, I still don't have access. IT confirmed you need to approve restoration. I forwarded you their message. He leaned back in his chair and said, your resistance is exactly what HR is documenting. There was nothing loud about it, no raised voices, just that calm, controlled tone that makes you sound irrational if you react. I stared at him through the camera for a full second, then asked one question. Are you directing me to produce compliance validation without system access and without formal approval? Derek blinked. He knew the trap in the wording. I'm directing you to do your job, he said. Then please email me the directive, I replied, so I can align properly. His face tightened again. We're not doing this dance, he said. And for the first time, I saw the strategy clearly. They weren't trying to manage performance. They were trying to manufacture a for-cause narrative that could survive HR paperwork. Because if they could label me insubordinate, they could argue I was terminated for cause. And if it was for cause, they could try to dodge Exhibit B. That's when I stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like a witness. That evening, I got the response to my request for my employee file. Not the full file. Of course not. It was an HR portal download, a few notes, an acknowledgement form, and a manager feedback summary. And there it was. A manager note dated 2 weeks ago, the same week the PIP was dated, claiming, employee refused directive and displayed unprofessional tone, pattern of resistance. No examples, no specifics. Just the kind of vague language that can't be disproven unless you have your own receipts. I did have receipts. I opened the Slack thread with Derek about Kestrel and read my message again, the one where I asked him to put it in writing. My tone was calm, professional, measured, so I exported the thread with timestamps. Then I pulled a changelog request from IT showing that management initiated the access revocation. Then I lined them up side by side in a single PDF, Slack timeline, IT change log, HR note. And in that moment, something happened inside me that I didn't expect. Not rage, relief, because if they were willing to write false notes to justify the label, then the only way out wasn't to beg for fairness. It was to make the cost of lying higher than the cost of doing the right thing. That night, I called an employment attorney. Not a dramatic TV lawyer call, just a normal consultation. I told him the facts in order. No speeches. No vengeance fantasy. And he said one sentence that made my stomach drop again, because it confirmed what I already suspected. They're building a for-cause file, he said, and they're doing it sloppily. Sloppily. That word mattered, because sloppy means traceable. He told me to do 3 things. Keep all communication in writing. Do not refuse work. Refuse impossible conditions. Give them one clean opportunity to correct the access issue. So the record shows you tried to comply. So the next morning before the check-in, I emailed Derek and Lena again. Same calm tone. I'm ready to complete assigned deliverables. IT confirms access restoration requires cost center manager approval. Please confirm approval by 10:00 a.m. so I can proceed. I hit send. At 9:00 a.m., Derek joined the call late. His face looked tight, like he hadn't slept. We're noting continued refusal, he said immediately. I didn't flinch. I'm not refusing, I said. I'm asking for access to do the tasks you assigned. I've requested it twice. It is waiting on your approval. He went silent. And in that silence, I realized something that changed the entire shape of the situation. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me gone quietly with my signature on the story, so nobody ever asked why a compliance person suddenly became insubordinate. Because if anyone looked too closely at Kestrel's timeline decisions, it wouldn't stop with me. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because 2 minutes later, Lena joined the call. She hadn't been invited. She just appeared. And she said carefully, "Given your continued non-cooperation, we need to discuss next steps." I looked straight at the camera and said, "Before we do, I need confirmation. Are you classifying this separation as for cause?" Nobody answered immediately, but I saw it in Derek's face. They thought I didn't know the words to use. They were wrong. By noon, my attorney had helped me write one email that changed the temperature of the whole building. Not a threat, not a rant, just a factual notice sent to Lena, copied to Derek, and copied to legal, using the address listed in our employee handbook. It said I was being labeled insubordinate without documented misconduct. My core system access had been revoked per management request, preventing me from completing assigned work. I was requesting immediate access restoration, a complete copy of any performance documentation, and confirmation of how they were classifying my separation. And most importantly, I was requesting preservation of records, Slack, email, HR notes, and IT access logs, because my contract included remedies for misclassification. I hit send at 12:14. At 12:22, IT restored my access. No apology, no explanation, just access back, like it had never been taken. That was the first time in 3 days I felt real control return to my hands. At 1:05 p.m., Lena emailed again. "Please join a meeting at 2 p.m. Attendance required." This time there was a subject line, employment status discussion, and there was one new attendee, Marianne Cho, legal counsel. I didn't celebrate. I didn't relax. Because when legal joins, it's not to help you. It's to protect the company. I joined at 2 on the dot. Lena was there, Derek was there, and Marianne was already on the call, looking down at something off screen like she was reading. Marianne spoke first. "Thanks for joining," she said, measured and calm. "I'm here to ensure we handle this appropriately." Lena slid into the familiar HR voice. "As discussed, your refusal to acknowledge the performance plan has been noted. We've also observed continued non-cooperation." I kept my tone flat. "I didn't refuse work," I said. "I requested access to do it. I restored access 8 minutes after legal was copied. That timeline matters." Derek's eyes flicked away. Marianne finally looked up. "Let's be precise," she said. "Are you alleging retaliation?" "I'm stating facts," I replied. Access was revoked after the PIP meeting. Deliverables were assigned that required that access. I requested restoration. It was denied until legal was notified. No drama, just sequence. There was a short silence. Then Marianne asked a question that told me everything. "Do you have documentation of the access change request?" "Yes," I said. "IT confirmed it was initiated from my cost center manager. I have the ticket and the response." Derek shifted in his chair like the air had gotten thinner. Lena tried to steer it back. "The central issue remains your pattern of resistance to direction." So I did what they hated. I asked for definitions. "Which direction," I said, "specifically required me to violate the Kestrel audit control?" Derek's head snapped up. "That's not what happened," he said quickly. "It's exactly what happened," I replied. "You asked to move validation post-launch. I said I needed compliance approval. I asked you to put the directive in writing. You didn't. 2 weeks later, I'm being called insubordinate for refusing a directive." Marianne held up a hand slightly. "Do you have those messages?" "Yes," I said. "Slack export with timestamps." Lena's face went tight, and Marianne's tone changed. Not angry, not loud, just sharper. "Derek," she said, "did you request the access revocation?" Derek hesitated just long enough to be guilty. "I requested an adjustment," he said. He was escalating issues instead of aligning. Marianne didn't react like a person. She reacted like a risk calculator. "Okay," she said. "Here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, you will be placed on administrative leave with pay while we review this matter. Lena blinked like she wasn't expecting that. I stayed quiet. Marianne continued. This is not a disciplinary action. It is a neutral step to prevent further process concerns. Neutral. That word was a small lifeline, and we all knew it, because insubordination was not neutral. Insubordination was a weapon. Marianne then turned to me. During leave, you are not to access systems or contact clients. You may communicate through HR or counsel. We will provide a written summary of your status by end of day. I nodded. Thank you, I said. And I want written confirmation that I'm not being classified as terminated for cause. Lena opened her mouth, probably to refuse. Marianne beat her to it. We will clarify classification in writing, she said. The call ended 3 minutes later. Not a speech. Not a victory lap. Just a hard stop. Within an hour, my phone buzzed with 2 things. First, an email from IT security requesting access logs and ticket history for review. Second, a calendar cancellation. Derek's performance check-in series vanished from my schedule like it never existed. At 6:11 p.m., Lena sent the written summary Marianne promised. It was short, sterile, and incredibly revealing. It confirmed. Administrative leave, paid. No finding of misconduct at this time. Employment status under review. A request that I preserve any relevant communications. And there was one line that made my chest loosen for the first time in days. We are not classifying this matter as termination for cause at this time. At this time. Corporate language always leaves doors open, but it also meant something else. They'd realized they couldn't just stamp insubordination on my file and walk away clean, because now the paper trail wasn't inside HR's folder anymore. It was in legal's inbox, it was in IT's logs, and it was on a timeline that anyone could read. That night, Derek tried to call me. 3 times. I didn't answer. Then he texted, "Can we talk man to man? This is getting out of hand." I stared at the message for a long moment. Because the truth was, he was right. It was getting out of hand. Just not in the way he meant. They thought this story would end with my signature. They didn't realize the moment they used the word insubordination, they activated the one part of my contract they never bothered to understand. And the next meeting wasn't going to be about my performance. It was going to be about what their own records proved. The next morning, I didn't wake up angry. That surprised me. I woke up calm in the way you get when the guessing is over, when the fog lifts and you finally know what's real. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and waited. At 9:32 a.m., an email came from Marianne. Subject: separation proposal, without prejudice. That phrase alone told me legal had taken over. I forwarded it to my attorney before I even opened it. Then I read. It was the cleanest version of corporate surrender I'd ever seen. They weren't terminating me for cause. They weren't even mentioning insubordination. They were offering a mutual separation with 4 months severance, 1 month more than Exhibit B minimum, payout of my remaining bonus prorated COBRA equivalent coverage. Neutral reference, dates of employment, plus title only, a written retraction of any internal for-cause labeling, and a clause stating they would not contest unemployment. In exchange, they wanted what they always want, a release of claims, confidentiality, non-disparagement. I didn't rush to reply, because the satisfaction wasn't in the money. It was in the fact that 2 days ago they were trying to brand me like a problem, and now they were carefully wording emails like they were handling a live wire. My attorney called me 10 minutes later. "They're spooked," he said. "This isn't just about you." And I already knew what he meant. Kestrel. If legal had to read the Slack thread, the access logs, and the HR notes, then legal also had to calm down the one bigger risk, that Derek had tried to bypass a compliance control on the company's largest account, and then tried to bury the person who said no. That's not just bad management. That's the kind of thing that turns into regulatory attention if it reaches the wrong desk. At 11 a.m., Marianne scheduled a call. Just me, her, and Lena. No Derek. That absence was loud. Marianne's voice stayed polite. We want to resolve this efficiently, she said, in a way that is fair and avoids further disruption. Fair. Again, when legal says fair, it means contained. I said, I'm willing to resolve, but I need 3 things in writing. Marianne paused. Go ahead. I didn't posture. I didn't threaten. I just listed them like a checklist. A written statement that I was not terminated for cause and was not found to have engaged in misconduct. A correction to any internal HR notes labeling me insubordinate. Confirmation that any inquiries will receive a neutral reference only. Lena started to speak. We don't typically... Marianne cut her off with one word. Lena. A soft interruption, but it landed like a command. Marianne turned back to me. We can include those, she said, and that was the moment I felt the final piece click. Because HR's power ends the second legal decides HR created risk, I asked one more question. What happens to Derek? There was a pause. Marianne didn't answer directly, which, in corporate language, is still an answer. Management decisions will be handled internally, she said. Translation, he's already being handled. We ended the call with my attorney sending red lines to the agreement. 2 hours later, Marianne approved most of them. Not all, but enough to make it real. And then at 4:40 p.m., I got an email from IT security. Subject, Kestrel Control Review, request for statement. They wanted me to summarize what happened. Not emotionally, procedurally. Timeline, directive, risk, refusal, documentation. I wrote it carefully. I attached the Slack export. I attached the IT access log response. I attached my original email requesting access restoration. And I ended with one sentence. I did not refuse work. I refused to perform unapproved actions that would place the company in violation of contractual audit controls. I sent it. Then I sat back and realized something I didn't expect to feel. Not triumph. Relief. Because for the first time, the company's own systems were telling the truth for me. The separation agreement was signed the following week. 4 months. Severance hit my account 2 days after my last day. The internal note correction was confirmed in writing. And the insubordination label, this big, ugly word they tried to staple to my name, was gone. 2 weeks later, a former coworker texted me. Just one line. Derek's gone. They said policy violation, but nobody's talking. I stared at that message for a long time. Because that's how it ends in real life. Not with applause, not with a dramatic courtroom speech. Just consequences. Quiet, procedural, unavoidable. They tried to erase me with a label. But labels don't survive logs. They don't survive timestamps. They don't survive contracts someone actually read. And the strangest part, and if they had just treated me like a human being, if they had said, we disagree, or even, we're letting you go, I would have left quietly. But they didn't want quiet. They wanted a story where I was the villain. So I let the only thing speak that couldn't be manipulated, the record. And when the record spoke back, they finally understood what I'd been trying to tell them from the start. You can call it insubordination, but you can't call it cheap.